What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to the channel.
Yo.
So, Nick, UFC 269 was literally so stacked that we did a few recap videos. Obviously, the main event, the co-main event, and then the Suga Sean O'Malley. Yeah. But I feel like there's a couple of fighters that we haven't talked about yet that I don't want to go overlooked, and for very different reasons. So I want to talk about Kai Kara-France and his incredible win over Cody Garbrandt, and then where does Cody go from there? But then also I want to talk about the resurgence of the Dominator, Dominick Cruz, getting sat down by Pedro Munhoz in the first round and then coming back and dominating the next two. I will say the lighter weight classes have never been better.
Yeah, and flyweight for sure. But bantamweight's always had a bunch of good guys, but right now it is just clicking on all cylinders, and it's really, really impressive. Some of the talent that you see in the 135, 145, 125 divisions is just unmatched in any UFC.
Best we've seen.
Yeah. It's incredible. But there's also a lot of commonalities that between Dominick Cruz, Kai Kara-France, Cody, all these guys, they've either fought each other or they're on their way up or they're on their way down. And who would have thought that of all those people, Dominick Cruz would be well on his way up,
right,
along with Kai Kara-France, and Cody No Love would be currently unranked in all weight classes. He was 11-0 when he went in there
against Dominic.
Against Dominic, yeah. He was undefeated 11-0, and right now he sits at 12-6 or 12-5. One of those two.
Something like that. Yeah.
1-5 in his last 6 fights. So
yeah. As Suga Sean so eloquently pointed out at the press conference, he's won one fight since 2017.
Yeah, and I love one quick note about that. Sean goes, my opponent doesn't really speak any English, so it's not going to be fun to go back and forth with him, so I better start to aim at somebody else.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, Cody's going to be on stage, so it's going to be perfect.
I tell you what, I would not have said this a few years ago, but Cody Garbrandt wants no part of Sean O'Malley. No. I think Sean O'Malley would starch Cody at this point in his career.
For sure.
Cody seems to be, I hate to call him Cody No Chin. I see the comments out there online. It's creative. It's funny. I get it. But there is an element of truth to every joke that makes it funny, right? Yep. And Cody Garbrandt has had no chin for the last couple of years. I don't know what the deal is. He didn't have any trouble making weight. The doctor, the Italian guy, I'm drawing a blank on his name, but he helps out Marvin Vettori and Lauren Murphy and some of the other top UFC fighters in different weight classes. Also some jiu-jitsu guys, Mikey Musumeci and people like that. He's a very good nutritionist. He got Cody down to the 126 limit. There didn't seem to be any issue at the scale. There didn't seem to be any issue with the rehydration afterwards. So I don't really want to just point to it and say, it was making 125 that did it, because when you saw TJ Dillashaw, for contrast, at 125, that looked dangerous. He looked like a skeleton at 125, and his chin didn't hold up. But this didn't seem like that for Cody, and Cody's really, truly not that big of a guy. And so I don't know what's not firing for Cody right now, but I don't know also where he goes from here either, because Cody Garbrandt was a young, undefeated champion of the world, one of the faces of the UFC, and now nobody really in the organization has taken more of a skid over the last 5 years than No Love. Yeah,
and he got further along than a Kevin Lee, but Kevin Lee had a very similar record before he got his walking papers, 1-5 in his last 6, and that's exactly where Cody sits right now. Cody's got the it factor. He is a star. You see him and you don't have to guess twice what he does for a living.
Right.
You can tell exactly what Cody does, and that's partially what the UFC is looking for. They love the oddballs out there, like we were just talking about Wonderboy Thompson. They love the Paddy Pimblets that don't look like a normal fighter, but also are. But then every now and again, you want to pepper in one of those guys that looks hardcore, that is hardcore. And I think hardcore is a great way to describe Cody, not only his fighting style, not only his life and everything like that, but I feel as though his training is probably just like that too. And the chin only gets worse as it gets hit. And in my opinion, because he's lost 5 fights in a row, and I think all of them, besides the Rob Font one, were knockouts.
Yeah,
vicious knockouts. And Rob Font did everything but knock him out. Rob Font was putting his hands all over him all night long. So that one really could have been. But I feel like it's years in the training room, and I think he might have been going too hard for too long, and now there's just no point. He's at a point of no return now.
He also boxed a lot growing up. And one thing we know about boxing, because we've been in some gyms where the MMA fighters are training alongside the boxers, nobody beats each other's heads in like boxers do. I mean, it's actually kind of sad because kids from young ages, like 8, 9 years old, are just slugging each other in the face as hard as possible with no cameras, absolutely no money being paid out. These are just kids trying to do a sport that they enjoy, and they pay for it dearly in later parts of their life and later parts of their career. And I think there was some of that happened with Cody. I do believe that Alpha Male is a gym where people do train a little bit too hard with the sparring. You know, you see what Trevor Whitman's doing right now. He's like a magician with those guys. But Gaethje and Kamaru, Brendan Schaub said it himself when I went up there. I saw Kamaru sparring and Rose sparring, preparing for their title fights, and I'm like, this is it? This is what you guys do for sparring? But the reality is the brain, you know, we go to the gym, we work our muscles out. We work our biceps, our chest, our legs. We tear them down, and they build back stronger. You don't tear the brain down and it builds back stronger.
Never.
You tear the brain down and it stays down, and it gets worse every time. And so I think that's kind of what's happened to Cody Garbrandt, and that's why they're starting to call him No Chin, because his chin really can't take it anymore. He really can't take the shots. And so I don't know what he does from here. I don't see him having much of a future in the UFC because the people at 125 right now at the top of the heap and the people at 135 at the top of the heap are savages. I think pretty much everybody in the top 5 of both weight classes finishes Cody by knockout.
Yeah, and he's also one of the guys kind of like in the position that Conor's in, where you get so far up into the sport, you become the world champion. Now there's no easy fights for you. You're not getting, you know, you're not working yourself back into the unranks and then going to potentially work back into the rankings, right? The UFC works on, on like a mountain style curve. It's like you have potential to become a champion, or you're going to be a stepping stone for somebody that we think has potential to become a champion. And right now, if I honestly think that historically speaking, you could probably go back and not find a single person with a record of 1-5 or 1-5 in his last 6 fights. Anything worse than that, they got to keep their contract with the UFC. I don't know if they're just letting him fight out his contract and then they're going to get rid of him. But if he doesn't change something very drastically, like now, then it might even be too late already, and he might have to start looking at other things. You know, he seems like we were talking about. He's kind of a hardcore guy. I could see him going to bare knuckle, but for the future of his family, for the future of his health, that's not a wise choice. I don't want to see him going over there and getting knocked out and tarnishing his career. You know, he was like a dynamite, right?
Yeah.
He exploded, 11-0, boom, world champion of the UFC, best fighter on the planet.
26 years old or something like that.
Young, yeah. Okay, some people's careers don't need to be 30-0 and it like could be 29-0. Sometimes a 15-fight career is all you need, and you've done more than enough to give the fans what they want, and also you've taken more than enough damage. So I would be looking at seeing Cody move into other aspects of life, coaching, maybe you know entrepreneurship. You know, he's that kind of guy. He's a savvy guy. He understands hard work and discipline, and I think he could be successful in other things. But I don't want to see somebody just continue to get knocked out and be a stepping stone for people, and especially if he can't find a weight class. Like, what is he going to do? Like, hope that the UFC opens up a 115 division and try to move? No. There's no more weight classes to go to. There's no more experiments for him to try. And it's kind of a tough road from here.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like the end of the road for him. It's kind of sad because he was such a great champion. I mean, he didn't defend his belt, I'll give it that, but like he was an electric champion, let's say that.
That fight against Dominic Cruz was one of the best displays of martial arts skills I've ever seen.
Yeah, and before we jump into Dominic Cruz, because he's a perfect example of what proper training actually and the appropriate amount of time off can do for a fighter, I just want to touch on the adversary to Cody in that last fight, Kai Kara-France, because I think that his performance is worth noting.
Sure.
I mean, that was a beautiful performance. I don't think any striking gym is producing as top class strikers as City Kickboxing is right now. Kai Kara-France, Israel Adesanya, Dan Hooker has run into some tough times, but he's also run into some tough opponents. So, but I think City Kickboxing, the shot selection when Kai Kara-France had Cody on the ropes was a thing of beauty. You know, you see a lot of guys who have an opponent hurt turn into brawlers, and they're just swinging, trying to get the fight to end. Kai did not do that. He was very patient. He chose the right shots. He did some uppercuts to split the guard. Then he threw some hooks, and then when Cody's hands went up and there was a little opening there, he threw a straight. And so really, really nice selection of shots to close the fight. He didn't panic. He was patient. He knew he had his opponent hurt. He knew he was going to get him out of there, and he did just that. So I do want to give credit to Kai and not just talk about Cody.
Yeah, and the lights were ultra bright, the brightest he's ever been under right now in his young career. And Cody was definitely the biggest fighter and former champion that he's ever fought. As patience was going to be a difficult thing, and he passed that test with flying colors. He showed us that he was able to be patient all the way through. You know, he wasn't going to rush and try to bring the fight to Cody. He knew that Cody was going to eventually do what Cody does, and he waited for that moment. And then when the time came, he came with perfect accuracy and pinpoint shots that put the lights out on Cody, and that was really, really impressive, especially being a small guy. I'd venture to say he's a small 125.
Yeah, he's very small.
He's not even that big of a guy for that small of a division. So I think it's very impressive. He seized his moment. That was really, really awesome of him. And in my opinion, that was actually a more impressive knockout than what Tai Tuivasa did and what Suga Sean O'Malley did. And it was because of the opponent that he did it against. Yeah. You know, Cody No Love is a far cry from Howley and Pauva. I'm botching his name, but Pauva has never been a UFC champion. No. Cody No Love was the champion at the weight class above where this guy was. So I feel like that knockout was actually one of the most impressive ones that we've seen in quite some time. And the way he was just able to put that finishing combination together, very impressive. I think Kai Kara-France poses a lot of trouble for some of the guys at the top of the 125 division, and I don't see any reason for him to move up to 135 ever.
No, he's a small guy.
He's built for 125, and if he can find his footing and get a great win streak going, we could see the belt around his waist at some point.
Yeah, I think he's on the short list for title contenders. You know, we're going to see the trilogy shake out between Davison and Brandon Moreno, but there's a need to put somebody in there. I know Askarov is out there, and there's Pantoja. There's some good fighters.
Cody's out of the question
125.
now.
Yeah, Garbrandt's out, but I think right behind Askarov and Pantoja sits Kai Kara-France, in my opinion. And now moving into Dominick Cruz.
Yes.
You know, the Dominator just continues to impress. Maybe he's going to fight DC next. Who knows? That was a weird beef between them that I didn't really care for. But
it was odd,
and it was a very awkward interview between the two of them. But the fight was not awkward, and it was very entertaining. Got dropped in the first round. Dominic has always been a guy who learned how to move his feet to mitigate taking big damage, and that's why in his late 30s he's still competing against top 10 guys and winning. And Munhoz was able to sort of figure him out in the first round, and then Dominic switched some things up, started moving a little bit quicker, started ducking a little bit better, was reading the shots coming from Munhoz a little bit quicker and able to avoid them and return with some offense of his own. I think he did a spectacular job of winning the second and the third round, which is what a champion like fighter does when they know they're down a round, especially if they got sat down in a round, that they got to come back and win the next two. And I think Dominic did exactly what he had to do and made just the adjustments to do so.
Yeah, it was an incredible performance. And I'll say this. We play a lot of music. We love music. Everybody loves their music and has their favorite bands and whatnot, just like we have our favorite fighters. And there's always a discussion about who's the greatest fighter of all time and who's the greatest guitar player of all time, who's the greatest drummer, who's the greatest singer. And all of that stuff is personality driven. You know, my favorite guitar player isn't the same as yours. My favorite drummer isn't the same as yours. And they might not be the best, or they might be the best, or in my opinion, they're the best, and in your opinion, they're not. But one thing you can always look back to, and it's more objective, is who was an innovator. Yeah. And Dominick Cruz is an innovator of the sport. Yeah. What he did with his footwork from years behind, and then he developed it and continued to kind of curate this style that rubbed off on all of the small guys. Now everybody's using it. Even people like TJ Dillashaw, Cody No Love. You're seeing Kai Kara-France use it. Everybody that we're mentioning, everybody that's in the top 5 of both of those divisions, even the 45ers, utilize what Dominic Cruz was doing, but nobody does it quite like Dominic. And I swear, by the third round of that fight with Pedro Munhoz, it looked like he had completely dissected what was going to happen anytime that Munhoz moved forward, and he was ready to go. And he probably could have done that, rinse and repeat for 10 more rounds, moving just like that.
It's pretty incredible. It's pretty, and you know, not a lot of fighters do the exact same footwork that he does, but he kind of invented the fast feet at these smaller weight classes. A lot of people, even the smaller guys, were just kind of standing in a phone booth, coming forward, kind of slow. Now the bottom two weight classes, 125 and 135, are literally, you got to be fast as lightning. You almost need to keep play your TV on half speed just to see what these young guys are doing.
Yeah.
And all of them can credit Dominic Cruz to some degree for that style. And I think that you're absolutely right. Dominic Cruz probably wouldn't go down in anybody's book as the best mixed martial artist of all time. But to say Dominic Cruz is not an innovator in the sport of mixed martial arts would be an incorrect statement. So I think that's a great way to frame it. And I think people in generations from now will be doing things that Dominic Cruz did. And it'll be interesting to see them make improvements, because that always happens, right? This is the fastest growing sport, both fan base and technique wise.
Yeah.
And I think that we're going to see a lot of kids take the platform that Dominic built and build something of their own right on top of it. So people are talking about Jose Aldo. Say no more. Dominic Cruz versus Jose Aldo at 135, while the belt gets sorted between Aljo and Jan, and TJ figures out what's going to go on with him, and he's in the mix. I think in the interim, we go ahead and put Aldo versus Cruz in there.
Yeah, legend versus legend. Yeah. Arguably the best bantamweight in the world of all time in the UFC versus arguably one of the best featherweights of all time. The first, I think they were both the first champions of their division.
They would both be my number one pick, actually, by the way.
And I think Jose Aldo was for sure the first 45 champion. I think Dominic Cruz was the first UFC 35 champion.
I believe you're right.
But that would be such a fun fight. Get these legends in there with each other right now. It also means something. It's not just one of those meaningless fights. This is two guys that could potentially be climbing the hill again for a title shot. And that's just next level stuff. The storytelling behind that, the rarity of this fight is so crazy. Like, Dominic Cruz has been to the top of the mountain. Jose Aldo has been to the top of the mountain. And now they've gone all the way down from surgeries and losses and things like that. And now they've climbed right back up and are potentially one fight away from a title fight. So I would love to see that happen.
Yeah, and tell me the last time Jose Aldo's opponent's been doing this longer than he has.
That's crazy. Yeah, that is really crazy.
Pretty much never would be the answer to that question.
Well, let's get these guys in there sooner than later so they don't turn 40 on us.
That's for sure. Guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Let us know, 1, what you think Cody Garbrandt should do next, 2, what you thought about Kai Kara France's great performance against Cody, and 3, what did you think about the Dominator coming back in his late 30s and trying to make one last run for the title. Guys, we hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you in the next video.
Peace.